I knew something was wrong the moment Victor Hale placed the envelope in my hands. His grip was firm. Too firm. The Hale mansion was loud with laughter and expensive glasses clinking. Yet the moment he spoke to me, the world narrowed into silence, the kind that makes your heartbeat echo in your ears. "Keep this safe," he said quietly. Then he leaned closer. "Don't open it in front of my son." My breath caught. Across the room, Daniel stood beside the fireplace, tall and composed in his black suit, smiling at guests like the perfect heir to the Hale empire. But his eyes flicked toward us for just a second too long. Victor released the envelope slowly. Heavy paper, thick seal. I forced a polite smile, pretending nothing unusual had happened, even though a cold ripple moved down my spine as I realized Victor Hale, one of the most feared billionaires in the country, had just trusted me with something he didn't want his own son to see. And suddenly the mansion felt less like a home, more like a stage. Before we go deeper into this story, welcome to the channel. If you're new or you've been here before, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This channel is all about stories that hit close to home. Stories about power, betrayal, and the choices that change everything. And if you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing so you never miss the next one. I slipped the envelope into my purse. Victor walked away without another word, but Daniel was already watching me, and for the first time since our wedding, his smile looked like a warning. The music swelled in the background as the chandelier lights reflected across the marble floor, and I stood frozen at the center of it all, realizing I had just stepped into a secret that could destroy the Hale family. 3 days later, the envelope still sat untouched. I hadn't opened it. Not yet. Our bedroom in the Hale mansion overlooked the city skyline, a wall of glass showing millions of lights below, yet the envelope inside my dresser drawer felt heavier than the entire city combined. Clara Bennett had grown up in a small apartment above a bakery. Now she lived among billionaires. But money didn't make things simpler. It made them stranger. Daniel had barely spoken to her since the dinner. Short answers, distant smiles. Something had changed, and she felt it. I stared at the drawer. "Just open it." But Victor's voice echoed again. "Don't open it in front of my son." Why would he say that? A warning like that meant two possibilities. Daniel was dangerous, or Victor was manipulating me. Neither option felt safe. I pulled the drawer open slightly. The envelope stared back. Unopened. Silent. And then footsteps sounded in the hallway outside the bedroom. I slammed the drawer shut. Daniel entered a second later, loosening his tie, his expression unreadable as his eyes scanned the room like he was searching for something. For a moment, his gaze stopped on the dresser. My stomach tightened, but then he looked away. "Long day," he said, yet the way he said it sounded like a lie. It started with the phone calls. Late ones. Too late. Clara woke one night to the faint sound of Daniel's voice drifting from the study down the hall, sharp and controlled in a way she had never heard before. She sat up slowly. The clock read 2:14 a.m. Daniel never worked this late. Curiosity pulled her out of bed. Barefoot, she moved quietly down the hallway, the cold marble pressing against her feet as his voice grew clearer through the slightly open study door. "I told you to move the money already." Silence. Then his voice hardened. "No delays. Not now." My chest tightened. Move the money? Clara leaned closer to the door. Inside, Daniel paced beside the window, phone pressed against his ear, the city skyline glowing behind him like a wall of fire. "Once this is done," he continued, "Mike, there's no going back." Her heart pounded. Then suddenly he stopped pacing, his head tilted. For a terrifying second, she thought he had seen her. Clara stepped back into the shadows. Daniel ended the call slowly, and when he opened the door moments later, his eyes scanned the hallway like a hunter searching for prey. Morning came with silence. Breakfast in the Hale mansion was usually extravagant. Silver trays, fresh fruit, coffee imported from private farms. But today it felt like a courtroom. Daniel sat at the far end of the long dining table, scrolling through messages on his phone, his jaw tight as Clara watched him carefully from across the polished marble surface. She decided to test him. "Did you work late?" Daniel didn't look up. "Yes." Short answer. Too quick. Clara leaned back in her chair. I thought I heard you on the phone around 2. Now he looked up, slowly. The shift was subtle, but dangerous. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, calculating something behind that perfect billionaire smile. Business, he said calmly. Clara nodded, but something inside her refused to accept the answer. You sounded stressed. For a second, the air thickened. Daniel placed his phone on the table. Then he smiled, the charming smile everyone loved. Clara, he said gently, you don't need to worry about my business. His tone was warm, but his eyes were not. And as the sunlight poured across the table between them, Clara realized the distance between them had never felt wider. The truth almost revealed itself that afternoon. Clara had been walking past the west hallway when she heard Sophie's voice. Sharp, angry. She stopped immediately. Sophie Hale rarely raised her voice, but now she was furious. You're taking a huge risk, Sophie hissed. Daniel responded quietly. Too quietly to hear. Clara leaned closer to the corner. The hallway stretched long and empty, portraits of Hale ancestors watching silently from the walls. Then Sophie spoke again. If she finds out, everything falls apart. My breath stopped. She? Clara's mind raced. Were they talking about her? Daniel's voice came next. Cold. She won't find out. A pause followed. Then Sophie laughed softly. You underestimate people. Footsteps shifted. Clara barely had time to step back before Daniel turned toward the hallway. His face calm again, as if the conversation had never happened. But Clara had already heard enough. And suddenly the envelope hidden in her drawer felt less like a mystery and more like a ticking bomb. That night the envelope called to her again. Clara sat alone on the edge of the bed, staring at the drawer as rain tapped softly against the glass walls of the mansion. Daniel hadn't come home yet. Another late night, another secret. She opened the drawer slowly. The envelope was still sealed. Victor Hale's handwriting stretched across the front in bold black ink. For Clara Bennett. My hands trembled. Inside could be anything. A warning, proof, or a trap. Her thumb slid under the seal for just a moment. Then she stopped. Victor's voice echoed again. Don't open it in front of my son. Why that specific warning? Why not simply tell her not to open it at all? Unless Victor expected her to open it eventually. Clara slowly placed the envelope back into the drawer. But something had already changed. She wasn't just curious anymore. Now she was afraid. The next morning, Victor called her. Not Daniel, her. Clara found him in his private office overlooking the gardens, the massive oak desk between them feeling like a barrier between two very different worlds. Victor studied her carefully. You haven't opened it. It wasn't a question. Clara shook her head. No. Victor nodded slowly, but his expression didn't relax. In fact, it hardened. For a moment, he looked older, more tired. Good, he said quietly. Clara hesitated. Then she asked the question that had been haunting her. Why can't Daniel see it? Victor's gaze moved to the window. A long silence followed. Then he said something that sent a chill through her entire body. Because if he knows what's inside, Victor turned back to her. You won't be safe anymore. Daniel sensed something. Clara saw it the moment he walked into the living room that evening. His eyes went straight to her, too sharp, too focused. He approached slowly. You spoke to my father today. Not a question, a statement. Clara felt her pulse quicken. Yes. Daniel's jaw tightened. What about? The air between them froze. Clara forced herself to stay calm. Family things? Daniel studied her face for several seconds, searching for something hidden beneath her expression. Then he smiled, but it wasn't warm. Be careful with him, Daniel said quietly. My father likes to play games with people. Clara felt the warning inside those words, but something else hid beneath it. Fear. And as Daniel walked past her toward the staircase, Clara realized something chilling. Daniel wasn't just suspicious, and he was nervous. Midnight returned, and Clara couldn't sleep. The envelope lay on the bed now. No drawer, no hiding, just truth waiting inside paper. She stared at it under the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Her life had changed the moment Victor gave it to her. Daniel's secrets, Sophie's warning, Victor's fear, Everything pointed back to this one sealed envelope. I felt it in my chest. Something was wrong with my marriage. Clara picked up the envelope slowly. Her fingers traced the seal. One tear, that's all it would take. But opening it meant crossing a line she could never return from. Outside the mansion, the wind howled through the trees. Inside the room, the silence thickened. Clara held the envelope above the lamplight, and for the first time, she seriously considered opening it. The seal began to bend, and the truth waited inside. The seal almost broke. My fingers pressed against the paper, the edge bending under the pressure of a decision that could change everything. I stopped. The silence in the bedroom felt heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting to see what I would do. Clara lowered the envelope slowly back onto the bed. Victor's warning returned with a sharp clarity that refused to leave her mind. Don't open it in front of my son. That sentence wasn't simply caution, it was strategy. If she opened it now, Daniel would never know. But if Victor expected her to open it later, then maybe the timing mattered more than the truth. Clara slid the envelope back into the drawer and shut it firmly. Decision made. For now. Just then the bedroom door creaked open. Daniel stepped inside. He froze the moment he saw her sitting by the dresser. Their eyes locked across the room. Couldn't sleep? He asked. His voice sounded casual, but his eyes flicked briefly toward the drawer. And Clara suddenly wondered. Did he already know about the envelope? Daniel didn't go to bed. Instead, he walked downstairs. Clara followed minutes later, her footsteps slow and cautious against the polished marble staircase. The mansion's barroom glowed dimly under amber lights. Daniel stood behind the counter, pouring whiskey into a crystal glass. One drink, then another. Clara leaned against the doorway. You usually don't drink on weeknights, she said softly. Daniel didn't look surprised to see her, but he didn't look relaxed either. He took a slow sip. People change. The words landed harder than expected. Clara stepped further inside. Or something happened, she replied. Daniel set the glass down. The soft clink echoed through the room like a warning bell. He turned to face her fully now, his posture stiff, shoulders tight. Her eyes studying her the same way a chess player studies a board after a risky move. You've been asking a lot of questions lately. The tension between them sharpened instantly. Clara crossed her arms. I'm your wife. Daniel smiled, but it was thin. And sometimes, he said quietly, wives are better off not knowing everything. The words settled into the room like smoke. The next morning, Sophie arrived early. Too early. Her black luxury sedan rolled up the circular driveway just after sunrise, the engine humming quietly before the driver opened her door. Clara watched from the balcony. Sophie stepped out wearing dark sunglasses and a tailored suit that looked more like armor than fashion. Something about her energy felt different today, sharper, intentional. Clara came downstairs just as Sophie entered the living room. Clara, Sophie said, smiling politely. Too politely. Did you sleep well? The question sounded harmless, but Clara noticed Sophie studying her face carefully as if looking for signs of something, or someone. I slept fine, Clara replied. A lie. Sophie removed her sunglasses slowly. Her eyes were cold. Good, she said. Then she leaned slightly closer. Good, because stressful secrets tend to ruin people's sleep. Clara felt the subtle attack hidden inside those words. But Sophie didn't stop there. She added something even stranger. I just hope Daniel hasn't started dragging you into his problems. Clara's stomach tightened. Problems? The mansion felt different now. Clara noticed it while walking through the east hallway, alone later that day. The portraits of Hale ancestors lined the walls like silent judges. Generations of power, generations of wealth, and now, secrets. Clara paused in front of one portrait. Victor Hale at 35. Young, sharp, unforgiving. Even painted, his gaze felt intense. What are you hiding? The thought came before she could stop it. Victor had warned her. Daniel was acting strange. Sophie hinted at problems. And somewhere in the middle of it all sat one sealed envelope capable of exposing the truth. Clara turned away from the portrait, but something caught her attention down the hallway. Daniel, standing near the study door, watching her. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. And for a moment, Clara felt something new beneath his gaze. Not anger, not suspicion, fear. That evening, the argument started again. Clara heard raised voices coming from Victor's private office. She approached slowly. The door was closed, but the walls in the old mansion carried sound easily. Sophie spoke first. "You're running out of time," Daniel responded with frustration. "I know that." Clara's heart pounded. "Running out of time for what?" Sophie continued. "Father is already suspicious." A long pause followed. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice lower, but filled with tension. "That's why I'm finishing it soon." "Finishing what?" Clara leaned closer, but suddenly the door handle rattled. She jumped back just as the door opened. Daniel stepped out first. His eyes landed directly on her. For a split second, shock flashed across his face. Then it disappeared. "What are you doing here?" he asked calmly. Clara forced a casual shrug. "Looking for the kitchen." Sophie stepped out behind him, and her smile said one thing clearly. She didn't believe that for a second. The next day, Clara made a decision. She drove into the city alone. The envelope sat on the passenger seat beside her like an accusation. The building ahead towered over the street, steel, glass, and power. Marcus Reed's law office, Victor's most trusted lawyer. Clara stepped out of the car slowly. If anyone knew what the envelope meant, it was him. Inside the building, the elevators moved silently toward the upper floors, where powerful decisions were made every day. Clara entered Marcus Reed's office 20 minutes later. He stood behind his desk reviewing documents. When he looked up and saw the envelope in her hand, his face changed instantly. Not surprise, recognition. Marcus Reed closed the office door carefully. No assistants, no interruptions, just the two of them. He stared at the envelope resting on the glass table between them. "You shouldn't have brought that here," he said quietly. Clara leaned forward. "Then tell me what it is." Marcus rubbed his temples slowly. The confident lawyer now looked uncomfortable, even nervous. "That envelope," he said carefully, "was never meant to be opened without preparation." Clara's patience snapped. "Preparation for what?" Marcus hesitated. Then he looked directly into her eyes. "If Victor gave you that envelope," he said slowly, "it means he believes something dangerous is about to happen." Clara felt a chill run through her. "Dangerous to who?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked something unexpected. "Has Daniel been acting differently lately?" The silence that followed answered everything. The city felt louder when Clara stepped outside. Cars honked, people rushed past. Life moved normally. But inside her mind, everything had shifted. Marcus hadn't told her what was inside the envelope, but he had confirmed something worse. Victor believed danger was coming, and somehow Daniel was connected to it. Clara walked slowly toward her car. Her hands trembled slightly. What did Daniel do? As she reached the car door, her phone buzzed. "Daniel," she answered cautiously. "Where are you?" he asked. His voice sounded calm, too calm. "Running errands," Clara replied. A pause. Then Daniel spoke again. "I came home early." Her grip tightened on the phone. "I thought we could talk tonight." The sentence sounded innocent, but something in his tone felt like a trap. Night returned, and so did the envelope. Clara placed it on the bed again after returning to the mansion. Daniel was downstairs, waiting. She could hear faint movement below. Clara stared at the sealed paper. Marcus's warning echoed in her mind. Something dangerous is about to happen. My heart pounded. The mansion suddenly felt like a cage. Daniel's strange behavior, Sophie's warnings, Victor's fear, all of it pointed toward the same conclusion. The truth inside this envelope was not just information, it was protection. Clara picked it up again. Her fingers moved with more certainty this time. Slowly, carefully, the seal tore open. A quiet rip, paper separated, and the first document inside slid halfway into view under the lamp's light. Clara froze, because the top line of the document read something she never expected. DNA test report, and the name listed beneath it was Daniel Hale. The words blurred for a second. I blinked hard. Daniel Hale, DNA analysis. Clara gripped the paper with both hands as the quiet bedroom seemed to tilt around her, the soft lamplight casting long shadows across the walls, while the reality inside the document slowly forced its way into her mind. She scanned the report again, line by line. Technical language filled the page, but one sentence stood out with brutal clarity. Paternity probability, 0%. My heart stopped. Daniel was not Victor Hale's biological son. The revelation hit with a force that made Clara sit back against the headboard, her breathing uneven as the weight of the Hale empire suddenly shifted in her understanding. If this was true, Daniel's entire position in the family changed. His inheritance, his identity, everything. Clara flipped to the next page. Why yet another document slipped out beneath the first. Financial statements, transfer records, large ones. And every transfer had Daniel's digital authorization stamped across the bottom like silent proof of something far bigger than a family secret. Clara's pulse accelerated because the numbers weren't small, millions. The financial documents didn't make sense at first, but Clara had studied business before marrying into the Hale family, and the deeper she looked at the numbers, the clearer the pattern became. The quiet bedroom turning into a war room of scattered papers and rising dread. Hidden transfers, private offshore accounts, company funds quietly moving through layers of shell corporations, all signed by Daniel. This isn't just theft. This was preparation. Every document showed a timeline stretching back 6 months, the money moving in careful increments that avoided automatic audit triggers inside the Hale corporate system. Whoever planned this understood the company deeply. Clara swallowed. Daniel had grown up inside the empire. He knew every weakness. Her fingers trembled as she reached deeper into the envelope and pulled out the final item. A handwritten letter. Victor's handwriting again. Bold. Direct. Clara unfolded the paper slowly, and the first sentence made her stomach drop. Clara, if you're reading this, it means my son has already begun destroying the family. The letter was only 2 pages, but every sentence cut deeper than the last. Victor wrote with the blunt honesty of a man who had spent decades controlling empires and enemies alike. Yet the tone inside the letter carried something rare for him. Regret. Clara read silently. Daniel discovered the DNA truth months ago. He learned Victor was not his biological father. The revelation shattered him. Victor admitted he had hidden the truth for years to protect the family reputation. But Daniel's reaction had not been grief. It had been calculation. He began secretly transferring company money, preparing an exit. Victor believed Daniel planned to disappear with the funds. But the final paragraph chilled Clara even more. Daniel needed someone to blame. Victor's handwriting grew sharper in the final lines. And you, Clara, are the perfect target. Victor explained the final piece of Daniel's plan. When the financial fraud surfaced, Daniel intended to shift the blame onto Clara's access to certain family accounts, destroying her reputation while he vanished with the stolen millions. Clara lowered the letter slowly. My chest tightened. Daniel wasn't just lying to me. He was preparing to sacrifice me. A sound came from the hallway. Footsteps. Clara froze instantly. The papers scattered across the bed suddenly looked like evidence waiting to betray her. The open envelope glowing under the lamp as the footsteps paused outside the bedroom door. Her pulse thundered. Daniel! Clara gathered the documents quickly, stacking them with shaking hands. The door handle shifted slightly, then stopped. Silence followed. I didn't breathe. Seconds stretched painfully long. Then the footsteps moved away down the hallway. Clara exhaled slowly. Too close. But the moment of danger forced a realization. Daniel couldn't know she had seen this yet. If he did, Victor's warning would become reality. Clara carefully slid the documents back into the envelope, but she didn't seal it again. Not this time. Because now she understood something important. The envelope wasn't just information, it was evidence. Clara moved quickly now. Fear sharpened her thinking. The documents disappeared into her purse one by one, each page representing proof that could destroy Daniel Hale and expose one of the most dangerous scandals inside the Billionaire family. But something else inside Victor's letter replayed in her mind. Victor feared something worse. Daniel might act sooner if he suspected the truth was exposed. Clara zipped her purse closed. Decision made. She couldn't face Daniel tonight. Not yet. The hallway outside remained quiet. But the mansion suddenly felt hostile. I need help. One name came to mind immediately. Marcus Reed, Victor's lawyer. The only person besides Victor who already knew the truth. Clara turned off the bedroom lamp. Darkness filled the room, and as she stepped quietly into the hallway, she realized the game had changed. She wasn't just Daniel's wife anymore. Now she was the only witness to his secret. Clara almost made it out. Almost. She reached the bottom of the grand staircase and froze. Daniel stood in the living room, waiting. The dim lighting cast shadows across his face as he leaned casually against the back of a leather chair, a half-empty glass of whiskey resting in his hand, while his eyes locked onto her with unsettling calm. "You're up late," he said. His voice sounded relaxed. Too relaxed. Clara forced a small smile. "Couldn't sleep." Daniel nodded slowly, but his eyes drifted toward her purse. He noticed it. "Going somewhere?" he asked. The question carried weight. Clara stepped closer. "Just needed some air." Daniel studied her for a moment longer. Then something surprising happened. He stepped aside. "Don't stay out too long." The permission felt wrong. Because as Clara walked past him toward the door, she felt his gaze follow her like a shadow. And deep down, she knew one thing. Daniel was starting to suspect something. The city lights blurred past the windshield as Clara drove through the quiet streets, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual, while the envelope sat in the passenger seat like a silent witness to everything she had just discovered. Her mind raced. Victor knew. Marcus knew. And now she knew. But Daniel didn't. Not yet. That was the only advantage she had. Clara reached for her phone. One call. Marcus answered immediately. "Clara?" His voice carried tension. "I opened it," she said quietly. A pause followed. Then Marcus exhaled. "I was afraid of that." Clara swallowed. "You were right. Daniel is stealing from the company." Marcus didn't sound surprised. "No," he said carefully. "The problem isn't just the money." Clara's heart sank. "What do you mean?" Marcus spoke slowly. "Well, Nana, Victor believes Daniel is desperate enough to do something far worse." 20 minutes later, Clara arrived at Marcus's office again. The building looked different at night. Darker, more serious. Marcus was already waiting in the lobby when she entered, his suit jacket gone and his sleeves rolled up like a man preparing for a long battle rather than a late meeting. "Show me," he said. Clara handed him the documents. Marcus reviewed them quickly. His expression hardened with each page. Then he looked up. Victor was right. Clara felt her chest tighten. What happens now? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked something unexpected. "Did Daniel see the envelope?" Clara shook her head. "No." Marcus nodded once. "Good." Then he said something that shifted the entire situation. "Because Victor is setting a trap." Marcus placed the documents carefully on his desk. "The investigators are already involved," he said. Clara blinked. "Investigators?" Marcus nodded toward the window overlooking the city. "Federal." The word landed like thunder. Victor had gone far beyond suspicion. Clara sat down slowly. "So this is bigger than family." Marcus gave a grim smile. "Much bigger." He explained Victor's plan carefully. Daniel needed to expose himself, confess, or attempt the final stage of his escape. Only then could investigators arrest him with full evidence. Clara listened in stunned silence. "So Victor gave me the envelope." Marcus finished the thought. "Because you are the one person Daniel never expected to stand against him." Clara absorbed the truth slowly. She wasn't just a victim in this story. She was part of the trap. Clara returned to her car after midnight. The city had quieted, but her thoughts hadn't. Marcus's words echoed again. Victor is setting a trap, and Daniel is the target. Clara rested her head briefly against the steering wheel. Fear mixed with determination. I never asked for this. But somehow she had become the key piece in a billion-dollar game between father and son. Daniel believed she was ignorant. Victor knew she wasn't, and the investigators were waiting. Clara started the car slowly. Tomorrow she would return to the mansion. Back to Daniel. Back to the man who had planned to destroy her life. The engine hummed softly as the headlights illuminated the empty road ahead. And somewhere in the darkness of the Hale mansion, Daniel Hale was already making his next move. The mansion felt colder when I returned. Not physically, emotionally. Clara stepped inside the grand entrance hall as the heavy wooden doors shut behind her, with a quiet thud, the towering chandelier casting pale golden light across the marble floor, while the silence of the house pressed down like an invisible weight. Daniel's car was already in the driveway, which meant he was home, waiting. Clara removed her coat slowly, her movements controlled even though her pulse raced from everything Marcus had revealed just an hour earlier. Victor's trap was already in motion, and she had just walked back into it. My chest tightened. Clara walked deeper into the mansion. The hallway stretched ahead like a corridor of judgment, family portraits watching her pass as if the entire Hale legacy already knew what was coming. And then she heard Daniel's voice. "Late night?" He stood near the staircase again, almost the same position as before, but this time his smile didn't reach his eyes. Clara realized something instantly. Daniel hadn't been sleeping. He had been waiting for her return. Daniel approached slowly, too calmly. The whiskey glass was gone tonight, but the quiet intensity in his gaze felt sharper than any weapon. "Where did you go?" he asked. The question sounded casual, but it wasn't. Clara set her purse on the table deliberately. "I drove around." Daniel studied her carefully. He walked past her, his shoulder brushing lightly against hers as he circled the room the way a predator circles before deciding whether to strike. "You're not a good liar, Clara." The statement landed quietly, but it hit hard. I stayed still. Clara turned slowly. "Maybe I'm just tired." Daniel stopped walking. For a moment, the room fell completely silent, except for the faint hum of the mansion's air system. Then Daniel spoke again. "You talked to Marcus Reed." The words cut through the air like glass. Clara's breath caught. Daniel watched her reaction carefully, and that was when she understood the truth. Daniel had been following her moves. Daniel didn't yell, didn't accuse. Instead, he walked toward the tall living room window and stared out into the dark gardens, the moonlight outlining his silhouette, while his reflection in the glass revealed a face far colder than the charming husband Clara once believed she knew. "You're wondering how I knew," he said quietly. Clara said nothing. Daniel continued. "I saw the car leave earlier." He turned slightly. "And Marcus Reed is the only reason you drive into the city that late." The logic was terrifying. Clara's mind raced. He wasn't guessing. He was analyzing. Daniel leaned one hand against the window frame. "You see, Clara, the biggest mistake people make around money and power," he paused, "is assuming they're the only ones paying attention." Clara stepped closer. "And what exactly do you think I discovered tonight?" Daniel finally turned to face her. His smile returned, but now it looked dangerous. "I think," he said slowly, "you opened something that wasn't meant for you." Clara felt the room tighten around her. Daniel stepped closer. Too close. The distance between them disappeared until she could see the subtle tension in his jaw, the faint flicker of anger behind the calm expression he was trying so hard to maintain. "You should have listened to my father," Daniel said softly. The comment shocked her. "You knew about the envelope?" Daniel chuckled. "Of course." My stomach dropped. Clara blinked in disbelief. "You let me keep it?" Daniel shrugged slightly. "I was curious." The casual tone made her skin crawl. Daniel tilted his head slightly as he studied her face. "So tell me something." His voice lowered. "What did you see inside?" Clara's silence answered the question. Daniel's smile faded instantly, and something colder replaced it. Daniel turned away suddenly and began pacing across the room. The calm mask had cracked. Now irritation slipped through every movement. "So he told you," Daniel muttered. Clara spoke carefully. "I read the letter." Daniel stopped. Then he laughed. A sharp sound. "You know what's funny?" He turned toward her again. "My father always believed he was smarter than everyone else." Daniel walked closer again. "But hiding the truth from your own son," he shook his head. "That's the real betrayal." Clara felt the shift. Daniel wasn't just angry. He was wounded. But wounded men can be dangerous. "You stole millions," Clara said quietly. Daniel's eyes hardened. "Correction," he replied. "I reclaimed what should have been mine." Daniel rested one arm against the marble fireplace. The flames behind him flickered softly, casting shadows across his face as he finally stopped pretending. "You read the DNA report," he said. Clara nodded slowly. Daniel exhaled. "For 32 years, I lived in a lie." The bitterness in his voice felt real. "He built an empire and called me his son, knowing the truth the entire time." Clara hesitated. He said he wanted to protect the family. Daniel laughed again. No, he shook his head. He wanted to protect the brand. The Hale Empire. Daniel's voice dropped lower. So yes, I moved money. Clara whispered the question that mattered most. You plan to frame me. Daniel didn't deny it. Instead, he said something colder. You were the easiest solution. The words echoed through the room. Easiest solution. Clara felt anger rise beneath the fear. I trusted you. Daniel tilted his head slightly. And that was your first mistake. The cruelty in the sentence felt deliberate. Clara clenched her hands. You would have destroyed my life. Daniel didn't hesitate. I still might. The threat hung in the air. Clara took a step back. You can't escape this. Daniel smiled again. You'd be surprised what money can do. He walked toward the hallway leading to the main entrance. My flight leaves tonight. Clara's heart jumped. Tonight? Daniel turned back briefly. And when the financial investigation begins tomorrow, he shrugged, your name will be all over it. Daniel reached the front doors. His hand touched the handle. Then the doors opened first. Not from inside, from outside. Cold night air rushed into the mansion. Victor Hale stepped through the doorway. Behind him stood Marcus Reed and two federal investigators. Everything stopped. Daniel froze. Victor's voice filled the entrance hall with quiet authority. I was hoping you'd say that out loud. Daniel's expression changed instantly. The confidence disappeared. What is this? He demanded. One of the investigators stepped forward. Daniel Hale, you are under investigation for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and financial conspiracy. Daniel looked toward Clara. Realization hit. You set me up, Victor answered calmly. No. He nodded toward Clara. You exposed yourself. The room filled with movement. The investigator stepped closer. Daniel backed away. For the first time since Clara had known him, real panic flashed across his face as the reality of the trap closed around him. You can't prove anything, Daniel snapped. Marcus lifted the envelope. Actually, he said calmly, we can. Daniel stared at Clara. The betrayal in his eyes burned. You opened it. Clara held his gaze. Yes. The investigator placed handcuffs on Daniel's wrists. The metallic click echoed through the mansion like the closing of a long chapter in the Hale Empire. Daniel didn't struggle. He just looked at Clara one last time. You were never supposed to open that. The mansion felt quieter after the investigators left. Victor stood near the fireplace. Clara sat across from him. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Victor broke the silence. I'm sorry you were pulled into this. Clara looked up. You knew I would open it. Victor nodded slightly. I hoped you would. Clara frowned. You used me. Victor didn't deny it. I trusted you. The difference mattered. Victor leaned back in his chair. Most people around this family are corrupted by money. He looked directly at her. But you weren't. Clara absorbed the statement slowly. Then Victor offered something unexpected. A position in the company. Clara blinked. Why? Victor answered simply. Because someone needs to rebuild it. Morning arrived quietly. The city stretched across the horizon beneath a soft sunrise as Clara stood on the mansion balcony alone, the wind moving gently through her hair while the events of the night replayed in her mind like scenes from someone else's life. Daniel was gone, arrested. The scandal would explode across headlines soon. The Hale Empire would shake. But somehow, she was still standing. Clara looked out over the city Victor once ruled without question. Now he wanted her to help rebuild it. The thought felt unreal, yet one truth settled firmly inside her mind. The envelope Victor gave her had started everything. A warning, a test, and in the end, it had saved her life. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe, like, share the video. Stories like this continue right here on the channel, and you won't want to miss the next one.